For over 100 years, our most important global relationship has been with the USA, the most important militarily, the most important in terms of sharing intelligence, the most important economically, and of course, by miles, the most important culturally, whether that's music or film or whatever else it may be. So where are we today with that relationship? Well, do you remember President Obama coming to the UK in 2016 in the Brexit referendum and saying that if we dared to vote for Brexit, dared to vote for independence, we would go to the back of the queue? Funny word, I thought. Why did he use the word queue? Americans don't use that word. They say line. Turned out a few years later that David Cameron had directly put him up to it. Luckily, a lot of Brits felt pretty insulted by it, and it didn't do the Brexit campaign any harm whatsoever. But where is that relationship today? And particularly given that for many, many Brexiteers, opening up, re-engaging with our friends in the English-speaking world was such a high priority, and a trade deal with America was something that was talked about just so much in that campaign by myself and many other leaders of the Leave side. Well, Boris Johnson has just come back from a week in the States. Yep, he's been in New York and he's been in Washington, D.C. And no doubt he'll be thrilled that Joe Biden agrees with him on climate change and agrees that we must shovel tens and tens of billions to poor third world countries in order to help them reduce their carbon dioxide emissions. Quite whether China intends to do anything in this game remains to be seen, but the Prime Minister will view that as a victory. Afghanistan was a very bad moment for our relationship. The unilateral withdrawal from Afghanistan without reference to us or any other NATO allies. I mean, that really was a bad moment. And then, Boris Johnson rings the president and doesn't get his phone call returned for nearly 40 hours. The one bright spark is the AUKUS deal, the deal with Australia, where we and the Americans will provide the technology for them to have nuclear-powered submarines. That's good news, but let's face it, what the French were offering was a solution decades out of date, that the contract was already over time and running over costs. So basically, Australia made a sensible commercial decision, but I'm pleased we're part of it. Without Brexit, that, in practical terms, could never have happened. So that's been the one good thing that's happened between us. But there's nothing else good apart from that and climate change. If you think giving tens of billions to the third world may be the answer to all our problems, there's nothing else that's good, because I'm afraid that we are still at the back of the queue. Boris Johnson goes into the Oval Office for the first time as Prime Minister. It was, I think, the most shambolic press conference I've ever seen in my life. Cringe-makingly embarrassing. The two leaders sitting in armchairs with masks on, thick masks on. At times their words were inaudible, which I think was perhaps a blessing in many ways. Biden reading off notes on his knee, longhand notes off his knee. Johnson trying to make light of things, talking about, well, it's okay because America's going to take British beef and maybe British lamb, and we've got a whiskey bourbon deal. So he was trying to make light of what is a very bad situation. Johnson called for a couple of questions from a couple of British journalists, at which the White House staff go mad and start physically ushering journalists out of the room. Yep, Sleepy Joe, the old duffer in the Oval Office, is not allowed to take questions from the press. The leader of the free world is not open to scrutiny in any way at all, because frankly, he's not up to it. But despite that, the old prejudices remain. On the Northern Irish Protocol, which was Barnier's poison pill in the Brexit deal, that has turned out to be far worse than anyone in government predicted. Some of us did warn about it, but even I didn't realise just how awful it would be. We now see Northern Ireland effectively cut off from the rest of the European Union, annexed, in a sense, by the EU, having terrible problems moving goods back and forth. The whole thing is unacceptable and it needs to be dealt with. But Joe Biden's old prejudice remains. I think he's one of those Americans who still thinks that the British Army invaded Northern Ireland and took it. It's a Republican, deliberate misreading of history. It's what Biden stuck with. He clearly doesn't understand that there are no circumstances in which we are going to put a hard border back on the island of Ireland, and that if we don't get a deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol and don't get it changed, we risk a serious outbreak of violence in the province. But this American president is not here to help the United Kingdom. This American president will do whatever Dublin thinks is right, whatever Brussels thinks is right, and certainly whatever Paris thinks is right. So we got nowhere with that at all. In fact, total intransigence, and I sense we're probably on a very major collision course for France within the next few weeks or months. And on the issue of a trade deal, well, Johnson realised that this was never going to happen and said the day before that Biden has other fish to fry. But Biden's language was totally dismissive. Now, does this matter? Well, we as it stands are the biggest foreign investor in the USA. The USA are the biggest foreign investor here. And if you read the financial pages, you'll see that every day there's an endless stream, tens of billions of dollars coming into the UK, trying to acquire British companies. So American business takes the view that Brexit Britain is a good place to invest in. So we have this amazingly close business relationship, and even without a trade deal, business between our countries will continue and it will grow. Of that, I've got no doubt. But with a trade deal, there's one particular area that could really be improved hugely. And it's not just cutting the price on Levi jeans or on Harley Davidsons or whatever it may be. No, it's on services, and in particular, financial services. New York and London are the two dominant financial markets in the world, and there exist barriers to trade, regulatory barriers to trade between the two, which, if they were erased, would make life a whole lot easier. So I do think with a trade deal, we do even more business, make more wealth, create more jobs for both sides of the pond, but its symbolism in the world would equally be important. And it's that symbolism that Biden doesn't want to allow to happen. So I'm afraid the Prime Minister comes home empty-handed. The so-called special relationship or important relationship, depending what view you take, is now absolutely in cold storage. There's not going to be any progress, I think, of any kind whatsoever. Ignore the commentators who say that Biden and Johnson have a close, wonderful, personal ambience and relationship. Well, look, they agree on climate change. That's about it, basically. Biden doesn't like this country. And I just wonder whether some of you watching this video might start to reconsider your view of a friend of mine, a New Yorker, a big, brash, outspoken New Yorker called Donald Trump. And I know for many on this side of the pond, you found him just a little bit too difficult to deal with. But remember this, he was avowedly pro-British, pro the Queen. His mother was a Scot. He was desperate to do a trade deal. I was in Trump Tower on the 11th of November, 2016, just after the results of the election. And people who became top cabinet ministers in that administration said to me on that day, we're going to get a quick trade deal with the UK. So you see, it's not all Biden's fault, because we had 4 years in which to do a deal. And even if Trump thought we would have got more out of that deal than America, he wanted to do it because he wanted to show the world he's not against free trade, provided it's fair trade. What he was against were trade deals with countries that undercut America in many ways. So I hope those of you that are skeptical about Trump rethink it. Trump would never, ever have backed the French over us on the Northern Irish Protocol. And to think that before Boris Johnson had even left America, that Biden had got on the phone to President Macron to organise a summit between the two countries next month and to promise a spirit of friendship, and indeed even a deal on working together, a strategic deal on working together with France and the EU on vaccine policy. Effectively, Boris Johnson was stabbed in the back before he'd even left the Oval Office. But this is really the fault of the Conservative Party, because they had 4 years to get this deal done, and because we had Mrs. May, and because they just didn't really quite believe in Brexit. Nothing happened until they were kicked back into life in 2019 by many of you watching this video who backed the Brexit Party, and that's what got rid of Mrs. May and ended this terrible, terrible period of a few years that we went through. So we've missed the boat when it comes to America. Doesn't mean there's not much of the rest of the world with whom we can engage. We've done it with Australia. But I tell you this, if the Democrats stay in office in America for any considerable period of time, that is very much against our interests. And interestingly, Biden is putting his pro-EU and pro-Dublin, putting that dogma ahead of things that would be good for the American public too. So there's no special relationship. It's our fault. We wasted 4 years. Let's hope in 2024 we get a very different American administration. Who knows? Maybe a friend of mine is going to come back.